Well, probably one of the hardest things that we have to do is forgive the people who've wronged us. And I am not traditionally a grudge holder. I tend to let go, but sometimes it's because I just stuff it down and ignore it. And in some counseling that I went through, I really learned that I was remarkably out of touch with my emotions, which in my line of work as a pastor is actually complementary to the role because it does help to be a little bit, maybe 1 degree off from where everybody is at because there's just so much emotion happening simultaneously in people's lives. So that detachment in one way was good, but there's a shadow side to it. And the shadow side was that as I went through suffering and all that, it kept me detached there too, which meant I wasn't processing my own feelings, and I had some stuff that I just held on to and didn't even know was in there. It's amazing what you discover when you actually start digging down, which is why so many of us avoid it. But it's why I'm glad that you're joining me here on RadCast today. Thanks for the feedback. Yesterday was a great example of how, you roll something out, you hope for the best, and I just kind of walk away from it and go, I don't even know. I probably should have redone that or just take it down. And then you start talking to me, you start sending messages and comments, and that doesn't build me up. It reminds me to keep going, but it also reminds me that God is the one that's actually doing the work, and I really truly believe that, and I'm grateful to be part of it and grateful to be part of your morning and your life. So thank you. Here's Ephesians 4:32. Paul writes, "Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as Christ in God forgave you." Nice, short, sweet verse. One of those verses that just tells you what to actually do. So just a real quick look at this again. He says, "Be kind and compassionate to one another," other people, "forgiving each other, just as Christ in God forgave you." So a couple pinch points there. One, he doesn't just tell us to be kind and compassionate. He tells us to do something with that kindness and compassion beyond just the general niceties. He says, actually, let that drive you to forgiveness. And that's something that you may not want to hear this morning, but it must be shared. And he says, listen, and it may sound even manipulative, but it's not. He's reminding us of this grand juxtaposition that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us, that Jesus models for us kindness and compassion and does so in the greatest, most generous way possible by forgiving us. This is what Chrysostom says. He says, God took a chance in forgiving you. He placed his own son in jeopardy. To forgive you, he even sacrificed his son, but you have received forgiveness time after time at no risk or expense, yet you do not forgive. Zing. I think that most of us can agree that we should forgive somebody. We wish we had these internal resources, but we just don't. And then what happens is we start to protect ourselves and rationalize why we couldn't possibly forgive somebody. Here are 3 risks that just came to my mind this morning. If we forgive them, we risk excusing or minimize their offense. And I would say, no, we don't. We acknowledge it. And there's a difference between minimizing and acknowledging. When you acknowledge it, you're saying, yeah, this really happened and it really hurt. You can forgive somebody and still have that in there. Sometimes we think that if we forgive them, it's like we're saying, it didn't hurt that much, or it doesn't bother me. That's okay. Very Midwestern thing to do. That's fine. Don't you worry about it. That's not what forgiveness does. It acknowledges it. The second thing that we risk with forgiveness is the feeling that they win. Some of us are more competitive than others. If we forgive them, that means that they win. No, this isn't a competition. There's Jesus, then there's everybody else. Jesus has forgiven all of us. He offers it to us at least, and we have this choice to receive it. And in so doing, it means that he wins, and then we win in the process as well. So really, everybody wins. You do as well. And then the third risk is we look weak and foolish. This idea that if we forgive somebody, we let them off the hook. It's like, what a weak, foolish thing to do. Well, consider this. Jesus, who has forgiven us, is the greatest example of a humble weakness that he takes on and a foolishness, because Paul says the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing. And yet Jesus is not only the strongest, he's like the super strongest. He's the greatest strength and the source of our strength. And Jesus is wise beyond wisdom that we don't know. So there are risks, but if we talk through them, maybe there's a little bit of clarity there. And then the reward. Think about the reward of forgiving somebody who's done you wrong. First of all, it sets you free. And you are really free because you are carrying around something that just burdens you. It's like always having a hand full and trying to live your life with just one hand. And yeah, you can do it. You can manage. And these are unseen things that we carry, but it weighs us down. It's a lot. Second, the reward of forgiveness, it will soften your heart and maybe theirs as well. And think of it this way. If you forgive them and you're really, with the power of God, able to let go and experience this freedom, that really will soften your heart. It doesn't make you tougher, it doesn't make you more hardened. It actually softens your heart because you recognize the compassion of Jesus because it just flowed through you into another person. And here's, I think, the added benefit. It may soften their heart so that they too will maybe not do that again. Like, that's the best way to show somebody. You don't, pound on them and pound on them and pound on them until they learn their lesson. Like, the beatings will continue until morale improves. No, you actually do the opposite. You pull a Jesus on them and you set them free, you forgive them. That will soften their heart as well. And maybe they won't commit the offense again. But that's not your responsibility, what they do. I'm just saying that's a benefit. And then finally, of course, the reward of forgiveness. It glorifies God. Jesus has forgiven you. He's forgiven me. And he calls us to forgive others like him with kindness and compassionate. But he doesn't call us to do this alone or on our own strength. Don't hear me say you need to work on this. Let Jesus work in you. So ask him the question as we finalize this very long form RadCast. Thanks for sticking with me to the end. First of all, am I kind and compassionate enough to forgive someone who wronged me? Think about the kindness and the compassion of Jesus. He has forgiven you. You and I have wronged him. Do you have that level of kindness and compassion? Not just nice, not just pleasant, but are you kind and compassionate enough to actually forgive somebody? Because that is the true test of compassion. Second, who am I holding a grudge against, and what would it look like to let go? Just let your imagination run wild with that one. Think about that. Maybe a name or a situation, a circumstance comes to your mind. Just think about that for a minute. Who are you holding a grudge against? What does it look like to carry that around? And more importantly, imagine what it would look like to let that go. And then last question, and this is where I step away. The question is, what is God saying to me? And that's between you and him. But I wonder what he has to say. I'm glad we could have this moment together. Forgive as Jesus has forgiven you and me. It's a beautiful thing. That's RadCast.